Well, good morning, everybody. It is Thursday, October 26, 2023, around 7:30 a.m., and it's a rainy October 26th this morning in Edina. This is the meeting of the Edina Housing and Redevelopment Authority. We do these meetings in a virtual or a hybrid sort of form with the virtual world and the real world. Folks can listen online. They can call in. They may be listening or watching in a variety of different ways. You can call in. The PIN number will pop up on the screen here, 786-496-5601. The only opportunity you have this morning to call in is during community comment. So if you have something you want to address with the HRA that's not on a future agenda or not scheduled for a future public hearing or on the agenda today, feel free to call in. Again, I'll clarify that. If it's you cannot speak to something that's scheduled for a future public hearing or on the agenda today. Otherwise, we're happy to take your comment if you're calling in or if you're live. But I see no one in the audience, so I don't think we'll have any live participants in community comment. Having provided that information, I'm going to call the meeting to order. And the first thing we're going to do is have our Administrative Support Specialist, Liz Olson, call the roll.
Commissioner Jackson. Here. Commissioner Agnew. Here. Chair Hovland.
Here. Next is the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And now we have a form of meeting agenda that's been published for us and the public. Is there a commissioner who cares to move the approval of the meeting agenda?
So moved. I second.
Commissioner Jackson moves, Commissioner Agnew seconds. The approval of the meeting agenda is published. Any further discussion? All those in favor of approving the meeting agenda as published say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. And now it is time for community comment. So if anyone wishes to call in, please feel free to do so. There's your PIN number. Brittany, do we have anybody listening in this morning?
Mr. Mayor, we do not currently have any callers, but because there is a slight delay in the broadcast, I do recommend that we wait 1 minute to give participants the option to join us if they would like.
All right. And as I mentioned earlier, I don't see anyone in the audience other than one of our folks that's going to be dealing with one of the issues this morning, wanting to speak to community comment, and I don't know if he has any remarks he wants to make in community comment. No, shaking his head negatively.
Okay, we're coming up on a minute here and we still have no callers.
All right, thank you. I think we'll move on. Our practice is to have our executive director respond to community comments that have been made in the prior meeting. And Executive Director Neal, anything that you wish to comment on?
There were no comments at the previous meeting.
All right. Then we'll move on to the consent agenda. There are three sets of meeting minutes on the consent agenda. Does anyone have any changes to any of those meeting minutes? Is there a motion to adopt the items on the consent agenda?
So moved. Second.
Commissioner Jackson moves, Commissioner Agnew seconds the adoption of the items on the consent agenda in a single motion. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adoption of the motion as stated say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. Those items on the consent agenda are adopted. And then we are on to our sole purpose this morning. Our main purpose of this meeting is in the reports and recommendations portion of the meeting. And our Economic Development Manager, Bill Neuendorf, will present this matter, and it is a potential proposed potential forgivable loan for a music venue at 3916 West 50th Street. And Mr. Neuendorf will explain what that's all about. And I'll turn it over to him at this point in time. Manager Newendorf, good morning.
Yes, good morning. Thank you. The agenda item this morning for discussion and action is in regard to a proposed loan using Spark funds to rehabilitate and occupy a vacant space over at 50th and France. The address of the project is 3916 West 50th. It's a lower level space. If you're not familiar with the precise area, it's next to the New Faraday, next to Pajarito. Ever Eve used to be in the upper level, and Lululemon just moved in there. They just finished their remodel. So they're on the main level. But that whole row of buildings has an underground basement level. Over the decades, it's been used for a variety of things. Storage. There was a skincare clinic there at one point. There was a small retail space at one point. It's always been underutilized. As we know, 50th and France is one of our highest valued commercial districts in the city. And so part of the background here is the thinking of ways to put new investment into those spaces to actually make it productive, to make it a contributing portion of the business district. So in short, this morning we're joined by Pete Dinovic with Buell Investments. Pete's a longtime owner in the district, owns a number of properties at 50th and France, and he's planning about $1 million investment into that space. It's a difficult space. It's in the basement. But this idea will create new jobs. It will completely rehab the space to make it handicap accessible, to make it attractive, desirable, a place that a business could operate. So in addition to the new jobs, the new business opportunity, the new services, it also increases the tax base in that site. But of course, with all great plans, there's always challenges, and the challenge with this one is financing. Right now, since it is a lower level space, it is not handicap accessible. And the cost to put in a lift and redo the toilets and take a 1940s lower level and transform into something that's usable is expensive. And that's exactly where the Spark program could help. So my recommendation this morning is to consider a forgivable loan to help with the cost of those one-time expenses. I've been working with the developer for the last couple of weeks. We prepared an initial term sheet to kind of structure what this looks like. But what I'd like to do this morning is walk through that in a little bit more detail. Of course, Mr. Dinovic and myself will be available for questions when I'm finished with the presentation. But anytime we use Spark funds for a program like this, there's a process. We've got to prepare legal agreements, hold public hearings, and all those types of transparent procedural steps. Before we start that ball in motion, I wanted to get your direction. If this is something you're excited about, you think it's got a shot of moving forward, we're happy to prepare the legal agreements. If you have any concerns or suggestions, this would be the great time to hear that. We can roll them into the agreement that we'll write. If you have any major concerns or objections, it'd be helpful to hear that so we don't waste a lot of time and money in this effort. So the map shows the site at 50th in France. The location is in the yellow. Most recently, Ever Eve had been in the upper level, and Shop in the City had been in the lower level. Ever Eve moved a couple doors down to a bigger space when they built their flagship 2 years ago. They were replaced with Lululemon that just opened up about a week ago. And Shop in the City moved to a bigger and better space that wasn't in the basement earlier this summer. So that frees up this opportunity. The tenant space is shown in these two images. On the right is the main entrance with a black canopy over the front doors. Very centrally located, but difficult to see, so that needs to be remedied. And then on the front side, on 50th Street, they have no presence. Their only presence on 50th is an exit door that's out the back. So that's part of the challenge with this space, is that it has a great front door that's hidden and really no back door. This image is the space in its current condition. And you have to trust me a little bit, but this looks good. Prior to a few months ago, the space was filled with demising walls, and it was kind of a mess. So the property owner went through to clear it out, to really better understand what was there, what the opportunities were. And I describe this as a basement, and while it is in the lower level, it's pretty nice. It has a generous ceiling height. It's all steel and concrete and brick construction. It only has a few posts in the center, so the sight lines are good. And it's a pretty large space. Until you actually took out all the junk, you didn't really realize that. And that's where I'm thankful that the developer has a strategy and a vision to actually transform something older and make it better. Yes?
If I may.
Yes, Commissioner.
So the light that we see, is that natural light or is that artificial light?
That is artificial light from 2 fluorescent bulbs that still work in the lower level.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Go back to that one, Bill, that in the upper left-hand corner, rear back corner, is that the stairway that goes upstairs to the, see the light that Carolyn's talking about?
Yes, so this photo is looking to the south towards 50th Street.
Yeah.
So in the far left-hand corner is the exit stairway that goes up to the street level. I'm standing by the other stairway that comes down from the main entrance. Right now there's a relatively small vestibule at the top level and a stairway that goes down. So there's a floor opening there for the stairway that's big enough to fit a stairway and an elevator or handicap lift, but you still have to get it in there.
So wasn't this the space that Tejas had, or is this different?
Tejas is right next door.
Oh, okay.
So the orange brick wall on the left side, the other side of that is the Tejas level.
The Tejas lower level, okay.
And they'd done something similar years ago where they have that lower level party room, and they installed some type of lift, I don't know when, 10, 20, 30 years ago. But they actually used their lower level space for a party room and then back of house storage. But right now this space obviously is not used. These are a few renderings of what the space could be. We received these from the architect who is putting some concepts together. They're not the final design, they're just vision concepts to show what they have in mind. But the image on the right is the central, like the bar seating location, and then the image on the left is the music room location with a stage, room for a green room, some storage area, utilities, those types of things. These two images show maybe 2/3 of the space. The other third are the necessary but not very exciting things, the kitchen. It needs bathrooms that are ADA accessible. I don't have an image of that. But this shows the reason why you'd go to this business. And this is a draft layout of that lower level. So on the left side of the street is the main entrance. So that faces that Nolan Mains Plaza and the walkways back there. And then on the right is 50th Street. So if we start on the left, in the lower left-hand corner, it's proposed to relocate the stairway to make room for an elevator lift in that existing opening. So that would get patrons from the main level down to the business. In that immediate area, there'd be a hostess stand, a little lobby area, new bathrooms that are ADA accessible, and the kitchen space. As you proceed to the right, in the middle of this image, is the bar seating area. And then as you proceed all the way to the right, that's the music seating area. You'll notice it's arranged with a number of smaller tables and chairs. It's intended to be a music restaurant venue with eating and drinking. The way that it works, and the developer can speak to this in more detail, isn't just by paying a cover charge or paying something for the music, but the patrons, what makes it work is they have dinner and they have something to drink with their dinner and they enjoy the music. It's that combination. So I'd mentioned some of the hurdles here. The biggest one is just the lack of ADA accessibility to the space and the high cost of making those improvements to an older space. It results in about a $225,000 financial gap to the project. The concern is as the costs of the build-out get higher, it really deters the successful business operations. We ran into this at the Edina Theater, and we used Spark on that project to defray the cost so they can actually have a debt level that allows them to stay in business. In 2021, we established that Spark program, and some of the objectives of, obviously, of the HRA as a whole, as well as the Spark, is to support new business and new investment in Edina, to increase the tax base, to create jobs, both permanent jobs as well as the construction jobs, and when we can, where it's possible, to deliver other benefits to the general public. So with this project, I've summarized the proposed terms here. There's a more complete list in the packet. But the overall project cost is slightly over $1 million. The estimated cost for the handicap ADA type improvements are about $250,000. We're estimating that at about $225,000. The timing of the project is coming down the road. The developer has been working pretty aggressively with some operators, but before they can really sign leases and sign deals, they need to know that the numbers can work. We would view this as a reimbursement, so the HRA's money would not be at risk, but when the developer builds the improvements, they would show us receipts, and then we would reimburse them. We've identified the eligible expenses, really focused on those one-time costs that address this unique site. The ADA improvements, elevators, lifts, toilets, doorways, all those things so that someone, regardless of their abilities, can get into the space. There might also be some related costs regarding ventilation and energy efficiency when it comes to the exterior doors and those types of things. So we would lump those in there as well. But we would really focus on those hard construction costs. Costs such as architectural fees, building permit fees, furniture, startup costs would all be ineligible. We really want to use these Spark funds to build things. I've recommended that we structure this as a forgivable loan. That's what's necessary to make the business work and remain successful and operational. The condition of forgiveness, though, is that the project gets built, the operator signs the lease, the operator moves in and starts his business operation and remains in business until the end of 2025. At that point, we would forgive the loan. If some of those things would not happen, we would not issue the loan, and if the business would close down prematurely, we would only forgive part of the loan. So we want to, the goal is to get the money to good use, but to have a successful business. We've looked at the site, trying to see what other kind of public benefits we could leverage there. When we did the Edina Theater, for example, all the pavers were in horrible shape around the theater, and we used Spark to improve those for everyone's benefit, the theater patrons as well as the general public. For this site, the pavers are in good condition, so there's not a lot of extra things that we need there. But the developer, as he's been working with operators, they've been focusing on the outdoor space at Nolan Mains, that outdoor public plaza. For the last couple summers, we've had a music series in the summertime. And while the patrons have loved it, honestly, it's been a struggle to fund that and to coordinate it and to book the music and to do the promotion. And so the thinking is that the music operator here would also coordinate the music in the plaza. That way we can continue that program. The people generally really seem to like it. But we'd find a way for someone with expertise in the industry to manage it. So as we look at administrating the loan, we try to keep it as simple and straightforward as we can. So I've identified the responsibilities of the owner, and that's to secure the tenant, get the leases signed, and secure private funding. This is all private money that goes in initially. The developer will be solely responsible for building the project. The city doesn't get involved with the contractors or any of that type of detail. But step 2 is where the HRA does get involved. We'll review the eligible costs. We'll confirm that the lien waivers are issued and the people have been paid. We'll confirm that all the requirements of the fire department and the building department have been satisfied and they've got a certificate of occupancy. Once we've confirmed that everything's complete, then we would issue the funds and reimburse the developer for the amount of the eligible cost. And then at the end of 25, we do at the end of 2025, we take a look at where the business is and decide and determine whether we're going to forgive the loan in full, in part, or not at all. There's several next steps this morning. So as I mentioned, what I'm looking for is your direction and your authority to proceed. I'm not looking for your approval of the project. What we need to do first is work with our attorneys and get a full agreement written. We think that'll just take a couple weeks because this would now be the third one that we've done, so we've got a pretty good template. But then we'll need to schedule a public hearing, and then we'll bring it back to the HRA board for your final consideration. So that we're aiming at having that late November, early December, depending on timing. So with that, a reminder that I recommend that we do prepare a forgivable loan agreement to see this project happen. We'd consider that full agreement at a future meeting, and this would be a way to really realize some of the overall ambitions of this whole effort at 50th and France, to create a business district that isn't just a place to get your groceries or go to the bank, but it's a place to eat, to dine, and to be entertained at all hours. For many, many years, 50th and France kind of shut down around 6 or 7 at night. We're hoping to extend it so that people can go for dinner and actually enjoy the nightlife. And this is the first step in that direction. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions, and Mr. Dinovic is also here for any questions.
Thanks for that presentation. So this is really, if we like the general notion of it, it's one of the steps along the pathway to a final approval.
That's correct.
Approve or adjust the term sheet and then authorize you to prepare the loan agreement that we would then consider at a future date. All right. Questions from commissioners at this point in time? Commissioner Jackson.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So the first question I have, the public hearing would be at the HRA, not at the City Council, is that correct?
Correct. Since these are HRA funds, it would be held at the HRA. So at this time frame on a future Thursday.
Okay, great. And then it sounds like the public benefits from the private investment, we're looking at sort of coordinating the work of the music festival outdoors and maybe some security lighting or cameras. But how does this compare to other projects that we funded as terms of, I know you talked about the theater, we got the new pavers. Is there anything else that would compare on the public benefits? We haven't used this program very often, so it's hard to compare. But we try to leverage those other benefits, and we did look at the theater agreement as an example. One of the other things we've written into it is that the operator would be willing to let other groups use the space during non-business hours, focused on like city groups or nonprofit groups. So let's say that your group wants to have a staff meeting and you need a place to do it that's interesting and creative. We'd be able to open it up, not during evening hours when they need to like serve dinner and listen to the music, but during the daytime hours they could open it up. We think the operator would be willing to do that. It's hard to put a value on that benefit, but that's something the theater was willing to do, to let nonprofit groups and agencies use it during non-busy hours of the theater. One of the other very minor things we've added in here, because I was hoping we could do some paver work or whatnot, but they're in really good shape in that location. But one area that we are a little bit short is water spigots. So it's hard, just when the area was built, there's very few outdoor water sources there. And with all the plumbing work here, we're hoping we can squeeze in 1 or 2 water spigots so that when staff has to hose down the sidewalk or do something like that, they've got a water source. Not a high value item, but if you're the maintenance people, right now, if you've noticed, they fill up giant drums of water and they tow them around the district. And it takes a lot of time, it's a lot of commotion. If we could actually plug a hose in, that would make life down there a whole lot easier to keep the area clean. Terrific. Well, actually, that's a really big deal to keep the sidewalks clean and everything. It makes a big quality of experience. So
thinking about the groups having access, I would sort of push to have the city and the school district have that access, and include the school district in that, because I know if it's a stage and there's a time for kids to come in and have a recital or performance, that'd be really good, and talk to the Richfield schools as well, and
Sure.
Hopkins and Edina Public Schools. But that would be great to include them as well, and I would probably maybe make the city and the schools higher priority than community groups. We could also include that, but I would encourage you to do
Okay.
that. So this is super exciting, and thanks for bringing it forward. Thank you, Mr. Dinovic.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Agnew.
Thank you so much. So I know that Commissioner Jackson asked a question about the specific Spark funding and how that would progress to a public hearing. Would this project in and of itself also need to go through site plan review and all of that through the city council?
Good question. It would not. Since it's an existing building and all the work is on the interior, they do have to work with the building department, fire department, health department, planning department for the construction, but they don't have to go to city council for a site plan review. They'll also need to secure permits for the signage that goes on the front or back or wherever the signs go. But again, all that is a staff level function. It's a pretty basic step. So this would be the HRA would see this. The city council would not formally see this.
Thank you for the clarification on that. Another question then is really around sound and what type of soundproofing might need to be going into this, knowing that there is residential nearby. Can you speak to any analysis that's been done in that area?
Sure. I can speak in general, and I might rely on Mr. Dinovic for more detail. But we've had discussions and, frankly, dreams of some kind of music venue here for many, many years. With the Nolan Mains project, we were hoping to get a music venue there. We initially looked at the space where Cooks of Crocus Hill and Bellecour Bakery ended up. We thought that was a good space, but one of the concerns was when you're above street level, you've got, now you've got neighbors across the street, and in the north parking garage, you've got neighbors, duplexes just to the north behind them, and there was more concerns there about sound. In this lower level location, like that's a big boost. The sound won't migrate as much. Right now, the interior is predominant, or it's a mess right now, but it's a lot of fire brick, kind of that masonry that's fairly sound absorptive. And the ceiling is metal joists with, I don't know the construction type, it's concrete, but it looks like plaster. What I'm trying to say is concrete doesn't absorb sound, but there's all these spaces, I'll show the image, maybe that's helpful, where you can put sound attenuation material up in between those rafters. It's really aligned to put sound absorbing baffles up there. So there's ways to mitigate it. I don't think this is intended to be a super loud music, head banging kind of place. But I'm not in this location. I'm not concerned about sound. Mr. Dinovic is also part owner of the Nolan Mains project, so he works with his residents. And if it is too loud, he'll be on both sides of that conversation. But Pete, I wonder if you have anything else to add.
Thank you, Commissioners. Pete Dinovic, Fuel Investors.
Introduce yourself too, please.
Yeah, Pete Dinovic. I'm the owner of Buell Investors, 5100 Eden Avenue, Suite 317 in Edina, and then also a resident of Morningside of, call it 15 plus years. Thanks for having me. This has been a 7-year journey as we think about how we recreate 50th in France, or reinvigorate, not recreate. In 2016, when we moved forward with the Nolan Mains project, we actually wrote into the PUD the opportunity to have a jazz club. Now, this is before any of the discussions that happened with music operators. So we've gone down the list. We've chatted with Lowell Pickett. We've chatted with Dana Frank. We've talked with everyone in this industry about what makes a good venue. And this is following, ultimately that PUD designation. What I'm encouraged by is community shows up here. Our community has shown up for the last 3 years in that plaza. We engaged Katie Vernon to do a music series. And Councilmember Pierce's daughter ended up performing in between two artists. And what I saw there was multi-generational engagement and really character development for young adults. And it was one of the cooler experiences that I've seen in that plaza. And it encouraged me to kind of continue to pursue this music venue. Over the last 18 months, I think we're underway with a reset in the retail space. And we, right, wrong, or indifferent, you might recall back when we got Nolan Mains approved, we had assumed that it was going to be a third anchor tenants on the retail space, a third boutiques, and a third fitness. We've done that. The interesting part is we've done it with, if you go back and look at the TIF package, we had 10 tenants that we had assumed. Today we have 20 tenants. Those 20 tenants are largely local entrepreneurs. So when I think about this investment, I don't think of it in the context, I think of it as, let's bring the school kids in, let's have a space that's really cool for them to experience their dreams of maybe performing in a band, right? But I also think of it in the context of how do we support the two Edina women who started East West Girl and are beholden to footfall, are beholden to how do we get people into this district, have people not just from the immediate area, but the larger region come in and shop and support those businesses. Those are real jobs. We have a ton of entrepreneurs that have made a commitment to our downtown. And so that's kind of how I have viewed this. Bill and city staff has been great about saying, look, this is, it's a nice dream. We can focus only on ADA. And I think, that's a big step, because for us, when we look at the $1 million, $1.1 million, less the $200,000 associated with ADA and those sorts of investments, you're still, music venues are tough. So the initial intention to put it in the Soul Cycle space, or where Cook's is now, no one could sustain a rent that we had underwritten. And quite frankly, when you look at the models and you start to peel back, how do successful music venues exist? It tends to be in these lower level spaces. So Commissioner, your question on sound attenuation. I think what we've learned over the last 6 years of pursuing this is that lower level space is actually perfect, because you look at a Village Vanguard in New York, or a Smalls, or all these other, Blue Note, they're all located in the lower level. And so we can manage sound well with really our largest impacted entity being Lululemon. And that's a challenge that us need to manage. That's my own problem if we have a problem. The way that you exit that space actually works quite well to manage that sound. So coming up the stairs, if you were to walk back to the Mr. Paul's Po' Boy shop, you could see, look in the window, you'll see a little vestibule on the ground level, right? And that's intended to kind of be a staging area. Well, that also helps to manage so that there's not sound kind of trickling out the back door, or front door as it is, toward the residences. And I think that feels appropriate for this space. And I view this, seeing the success of Morningside After Dark, I view this as bringing our community into our downtown, and grateful for at least the opportunity to try and engage here and seek some support. So thank you.
Thank you. I don't think I have any other questions. If you have questions, otherwise we can.
No, good. Thank you. I have some kind of vague recollection. Do we have any kind of a zoning issue, or do we allow live music on the code side in this location?
We do.
Do we have to do something on the city council side?
I don't think
Not
we
related to site plan, but related to the use.
I don't believe we do. Carrie Teague and Chris Acker have already reviewed this as part of that initial conversation with the city departments. The city regulates restaurants. We don't regulate whether or not that restaurant plays music while people eat. So if this were just to be a music club with no food and no beverage, I think that's a different type of use. But since this is a combination, primarily food and beverage with live music as an accompaniment, the planning department looks at it as a restaurant. So I don't think we need any rezoning. We've had several conversations with Mr. Teague about that.
All right, good. Well, I thought Mr. Dienevic did an excellent job of describing kind of how we got to where we are, and the notion that originally when they came with that, I call it quite an evolutionary idea of tearing down that middle ramp. We were looking just at the north side of the street, and they came with this idea that really sparked a lot of remake of 50th and France, and it's been really a wonderful thing to see. So adding in this component for me is a logical next step. So I think we can look at this motion, and my inclination would be to move it along and see where it goes. And the other question I had was more general in nature, related to Spark. When I saw the use of Spark funds here, it prompted me to think about that overall fund and the pot of money that's there, if you will. Don't we have a December 31, 2024 deadline for that, if memory serves me right, for using that or lose it?
It's actually 2025.
All right. Well,
yes, we've got some time,
yeah.
But I continue to do work on that. With the current economics, it's been a struggle, quite honestly. We had hoped to fund that hotel and get that moving over on 77th Street, and it seems right now the two people are suing each other, so that doesn't seem to be going anywhere at the moment. I think they're in mediation, is what I'm hearing, but I'm always out talking to folks to see how we can invest those monies, because if we use them locally, we can use them until 2025. If we pass that date, then we return them back to Hennepin County, and we'd much rather keep them local if we could.
Sure. What's the remaining balance in that Spark fund?
There's about $4 million left.
$4 million?
Yeah.
Okay, good to know. All right, thank you. Thank you for being here this morning, Mr. Dienevic. To my colleagues, I say, do one of the commissioners care to move the approval of the term sheet that Manager Neuendorf has brought to us this morning, and then authorize staff to prepare a forgivable loan agreement for future consideration for this restaurant music venue?
So moved.
Second.
A motion by Commissioner Agnew, a second by Member Jackson to approve the term sheet and authorize staff to prepare a forgivable loan agreement for future consideration with respect to this idea that's been advanced this morning of a restaurant and music space in the lower level, I'll call it the Lululemon space at 50th and France. Any further discussion? All those in favor of adoption of the motion as stated, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. All right, here we go. Next step. Executive Director report. That concludes the action items for this morning. Executive Director, any comments?
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. This is the time of year when we begin to work on your next year's meeting schedule. One of the things that we have talked about with the HRA in the past is right now we alternate so that you have a council meeting on first and third Tuesdays, and you have HRA meetings on second and fourth Thursdays. We had the discussion about would it be better for you if we push those HRA meetings up so that you had council meeting and HRA meeting the same week, so that you had actual weeks off where you didn't have any meetings. From a staff standpoint, it doesn't make that big of a difference to us in terms of our our prep cycle. But we are working on that schedule, and I will put together a draft that looks like that. I'll put together a draft that looks like the conventional kind of second and fourth Thursday with a couple of months where you don't meet twice. But is there any feedback you have for me on that? Is that something you know that you're interested in, or you know you're not interested in going forward?
Commissioner Jackson?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So we did that a couple of times this year, having a Tuesday city council meeting and a Thursday HRA.
We did.
And I found that exhausting.
Okay.
Just for the record, it was a lot of information to process in a few number of days. So that's the feedback that I would
Okay.
give.
Commissioner?
I would echo that of having a strong preference to keep it as is. It gives kind of HRA week, city council week. That would be how I would want to keep it.
Great. Okay. And our standing procedure has been too, when we're doing our advanced planning, if we can cancel, we try to cancel as early as we can to provide you with as much notice as we can so that you can do something else with that time. But I haven't suggested this yet to Commissioner Risser or Commissioner Pierce, but we'll prepare both of those options for you to take a look at next time.
All right. I join my colleagues, I guess. We've looked at it both ways. We've tried it both ways. One proviso I would offer up is that if it's a lighter week for HRA and we can tack it onto the back of a city council meeting and be really efficient that way, and pick up some open space for whatever commissioners want to use that space for, or city council members. I think that's an idea.
Okay.
And you've done that before, like tonight,
Yeah.
or this morning. I mean, we had one issue on the
Yeah.
agenda. Even if we went late on the city council meeting, if we took an extra half hour to do some HRA work, I'd prefer that. Other
Okay.
than, then you've got an open week ahead of you the following week.
Okay. We'll do that too.
All right.
That's all I have. Thank you.
All right, HRA commissioner comments. Commissioner Jackson, anything?
Well, I think since we last met, we got a tour of 4040 West 70th. And that was really quite an incredible building. It's a nice add-on to what we did today. They have a beautiful meeting room, actually very large, set up for some catering, and I think it's their expectation that that's going to be a space that the public can access and have children's programming. They have stuff ready for art projects, and to bring the community into that building. And it has a beautiful set of windows and just an incredible room. And I really appreciate them walking us through and showing us the units, all different sizes. And hopefully we'll have some residents in there before too long.
Yeah, thank you. Commissioner Agnew, anything?
No, not this morning.
All right, good. I think this is an issue that relates to both council and HRA. We've been talking about how to get people safely across France Avenue, and we've had several iterations of ideas on that. From being involved in a Bloomberg Infrastructure Hub meeting virtually this week, and listening to the stories of some of the cities around the country that have applied for RAISE funds or IIJA funds for trail systems and other things, and some of them have had to go back and resubmit, but they said US DOT's staff were excellent to work with in providing guidance. And it also seemed to me that if it's multi-jurisdictional, you got a better chance of success. If it achieves some of those goals like we would have of getting kids from affordable housing units more safely over to school if they wanted to walk from, the York Avenue Townhome Project over to Cornelia School. There are so many elements of this that are possibilities in terms of federal funding approval. Some of these cities, smaller in nature, have gotten up to $25 million for projects. And so I think we should seriously think about, and I'll send you some links, Manager Neal, that they provided during the meeting, both to look at other projects in other cities that have been successful, so we can model after them, and also then some basic infrastructure hub information. And they've got an infrastructure boot camp event coming up that somebody may want to attend, but I think there's a real potential opportunity here if we can get the county to be our partner and move faster on this thing than we otherwise thought was possible, because we don't have any sources of funding right now. No, we talk about that. No known source of funding, but great ideas. And this is a chance to link up great ideas with a possible source of federal funding. But there's only a couple of years left in this cycle of this money being available, so we need to move. But I'll get that information to both of you, and we'll go from there. Okay, that's all I had. That prompt anything from anybody else? All right. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
A second.
Got a motion by Commissioner Jackson, second by Commissioner Agnew, that we adjourn the meeting of the Edina Housing Redevelopment Authority this Thursday, October 26, 2023. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion as stated, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Carried. We stand adjourned. Oh, yeah, if we could pull this off, get that thing funded and move.